The daughter who feels entitled calls her single dad a broke loser and insults him online because he cancels supporting her $150,000 wedding. Hey everyone, I'm a 44-year-old dad with a 23-year-old daughter named Trisha, who's tying the knot with her boyfriend Jerry, 26, in a couple of months. I became a dad when I was in my early 20s, but tragedy struck just 6 months into my marriage when my wife passed away from an epileptic seizure. Since then, my sole focus has been on giving Trisha the best life possible. I threw myself into my job after my wife's death, with my sister helping to take care of Trisha at home while I worked. I worked hard, got promoted, and poured all my earnings into raising Trisha and fulfilling her every wish. I admit I spoiled her rotten, thinking I was doing what was best for her. Despite my sister warning me, I couldn't resist giving Trisha whatever she asked for. About a week ago, Trisha dropped a bombshell. She wanted me to foot the bill for her wedding, which she envisioned as a lavish affair costing around $150,000. The guest list was long, including people she hardly knew, and she insisted on an expensive venue and a custom-made designer gown, along with jewelry for herself and her bridesmaids. Now, I'm not stingy and I've done well for myself in business, but shelling out that much money would seriously dent my finances. So with a heavy heart, I had to tell Trisha that I couldn't afford such an extravagant wedding and suggested scaling it down or having her contribute. She seemed disappointed and asked if I hadn't set aside a wedding fund for her. So I had set aside $75,000 for Trisha's wedding, thinking it would be a good start. I never expected her to assume I'd cover the entire bill. I figured she might ask for help with the venue or catering, maybe both, but not every single expense. Plus, I hadn't anticipated her getting married so soon. They'd only been together for a year, and I thought they could wait a bit longer. That way I could save up more, or maybe they could work on getting better jobs and pitch in for the wedding themselves. I tried explaining all this to her, but she just got angry and stormed out of the house. She was upset because I said I couldn't afford the wedding, even though she knew I could. It wasn't about affordability. I just didn't want to spend that much on a wedding. She accused me of being selfish, saying I'd easily invest in a business deal without hesitation, but I couldn't make her understand the difference between personal finances and business decisions, so I let it go. Feeling guilty, I eventually decided to take out a personal loan to cover the wedding costs. I reached out to a banker friend right away to discuss it. I figured I could repay the loan gradually, so it didn't seem like a huge issue to me. Trisha didn't speak to me for the next 2 days, and I decided to wait until I finalized the loan before reaching out to her. However, on the 3rd day, she made a harsh Facebook post, calling me a broke loser. She accused me of being selfish, prioritizing work over her, and even hinted that her mother's death was somehow my fault, which was incredibly hurtful. She painted me as a selfish workaholic who cared only about myself and my business, yet somehow labeled me a broke loser. It felt like a slap in the face, so I immediately blocked her on social media. I was so shaken by her words that I couldn't even bring myself to check my phone or social media for a few hours. I completely withdrew, prompting my sister to visit out of concern. Seeing her, I couldn't hold back my emotions, and I broke down in front of her. Trisha's words had wounded me deeply, and I felt depressed for the next few days, barely able to function outside of work. My sister stayed with me, offering support and care. She also spoke to Trisha and convinced her to take down the hurtful post. But at that point, none of it really mattered because I now knew exactly what my daughter thought of me, and it shattered my heart. I couldn't find the words to say to her, so I remained silent and didn't reach out. I'd only unblocked her yesterday when I started feeling a bit better emotionally. My sister had already given Trisha an earful, but I couldn't let it slide until I'd talked to her myself. I had already canceled the loan, and as terrible as it sounds, I wanted Trisha to feel the same emotional pain she'd caused me. I know she's my daughter, and I shouldn't harbor such feelings, but I wanted her to understand my hurt. So I unblocked her and waited for her to make the first move. She called me last evening, apologizing and explaining that she was just angry and said things she didn't mean. But even as she apologized, it didn't feel sincere. She sounded more annoyed than genuinely sorry, which only left me feeling more frustrated and agitated. When I heard the tone of her voice, I knew I had to stop her apology right then and there. I revealed to her what I had planned to do with the loan and the surprise I had been preparing. At first, she seemed excited, but her expression changed when I explained that I had canceled the loan after her hurtful post. I made it clear that I wouldn't be covering any of the wedding expenses anymore, and that she would have to find a way to pay for it herself since she prided herself on being so independent while labeling me as selfish. Before she could say anything, I continued expressing my feelings of selfishness. I told her that if I was indeed selfish, then I wanted her to repay me for everything I had spent on her since she turned 18. It wasn't about the money. I didn't actually expect her to pay it back. My intention was to make her realize the extent of her actions and the consequences of taking advantage of my generosity. I listed all the expenses: her college tuition, accommodation, her preference for living off campus in her own apartment instead of the dorms, and the frequent shopping trips with her friends, all of which she knew I would foot the bill for. She had become accustomed to being spoiled and had taken advantage of it. I told her that she needed to repay me for all of it, and then we could part ways without ever having to speak to each other again. She wouldn't have to maintain ties with a father she considered a broke loser, and I wouldn't have to deal with a disrespectful and entitled daughter. It seemed like the best solution for both of us. As I reached that final part of the conversation, I found myself practically shouting into the phone, overwhelmed by rage. All the emotions I had bottled up over the past few days erupted, and I couldn't contain them any longer. After venting my frustration at Trisha, I abruptly ended the call and collapsed back onto the couch, attempting to regain my composure. My sister had emerged from the kitchen upon hearing my raised voice, and although she remained silent initially, I could sense that she harbored strong opinions about the situation. Later that evening during dinner, she broached the topic, expressing her belief that I bore some responsibility for Trisha's behavior due to my indulgent parenting. She argued that blaming Trisha entirely wasn't fair since I had played a significant role in shaping her character. According to my sister, the appropriate response would have been to withhold support until Trisha genuinely apologized, rather than retaliating in anger. She pointed out that Trisha's apology likely stemmed from external pressure, not sincere remorse. My sister reminded me of occasions when Trisha had mistreated others, yet I had been lenient, hoping she would outgrow it. However, now that Trisha had turned her hostility towards me, I finally recognized the consequences of my parenting approach. There was no one else to blame but myself. My sister suggested that I could have still corrected the situation by allowing Trisha to reflect on her actions independently. Instead, I had reacted impulsively, stooping to her level of vindictiveness and cruelty. Now, Trisha was likely to be even more resentful, and the chance for her to acknowledge her wrongdoing seemed slim. Reflecting on my sister's words, I realized she had a point. Perhaps silence would have been a more effective response, sparing me the burden of guilt. However, at that moment, I was too angered to accept her perspective. I stormed away from the dinner table, leaving my food untouched. Since last night, Trisha and I haven't exchanged a word. Taking a step back and reflecting on the situation with a calmer mind, I can now understand my sister's perspective. I've come to recognize that my reaction mirrored Trisha's behavior, which isn't a positive example for my daughter. However, I'm hesitant to entirely accept blame. Trisha is an adult capable of making her own choices. While I didn't explicitly teach her to act in such a manner, I also failed to instill values that would discourage such behavior. I'm grappling with whether I bear full responsibility for this situation. Update: Hi everyone, I've come to acknowledge my mistake and apologize to my sister, recognizing her support during this challenging time. It wasn't easy admitting my failure as a father, but it's a necessary step towards growth. I realize now that I may have been too lenient with Trisha, avoiding confrontation even when she behaved poorly. This approach has backfired as Trisha's actions have shown her to be less than kind-hearted. I haven't reached out to her since our last conversation, and she hasn't attempted to contact me either. It seems this silence will persist until Trisha offers a sincere apology. Reconciliation seems unlikely at this point. Update 2: My sister believes I should have taken this approach from the start, immediately addressing Trisha's hurtful post. Reflecting on our phone call, I realize it didn't improve the situation. If anything, it highlighted my failure as a father. My intention was always to provide Trisha with everything she needed, perhaps overcompensating for her loss. However, this indulgence may have inadvertently contributed to her current behavior. I realize now that I may have gone too far in trying to make up for Trisha's loss, neglecting important aspects of parenting like discipline. I struggled to scold or punish her when necessary, believing that my indulgence was a form of love. In hindsight, perhaps my actions weren't entirely wrong, but they did stem from a selfish desire to shield her from hardship. Unfortunately, this approach has led to suffering for both Trisha and me. While I regret the way things unfolded, I don't regret expressing my feelings to Trisha. It was necessary for my own peace of mind, although I could have approached it with more gentleness. I don't feel the need to apologize to her, and until she offers a sincere apology, I'll continue to maintain my distance. Update 3. Recently, I received a payment of $22,000 from Trisha that we haven't communicated at all in the past few days. I shared this development with my sister, who believes it might be related to my request for repayment of everything I've provided for Trisha since she became an adult. While this gesture might seem considerate to some, I found it rather unsettling that Trisha sent the money without any accompanying explanation or apology. In response, I returned the money promptly. What I truly desired was a genuine apology, but it seems unlikely that I'll receive one. I don't need her money either, and she hasn't returned it yet. I'm uncertain about what will happen next. Shortly after posting my update, Trisha called me, her tone distant, to inform me that she was merely following my request by sending the money. She urged me not to make a big deal out of it and just accept it. I reiterated that I didn't want her money. My intention was to make her feel the same discomfort she had caused me during our previous conversation. Despite my refusal, she insisted, explaining that she no longer felt comfortable owing me money after the insults exchanged during our phone call. In response, I reasoned that I felt similarly uncomfortable accepting money from her given the hurtful remarks she had made on Facebook. Our conversation reached a stalemate, and after a brief silence, Trisha expressed her exhaustion with my behavior. Feeling the same, I echoed her sentiments. Eventually, Trisha offered to discuss our issues genuinely, but I declined, stating that I'd only desired an apology. If she was willing to apologize, we could talk, otherwise I had nothing more to say. With that, I ended the call, and Trisha didn't attempt to contact me further. I've expressed my thoughts, and now the decision lies with her. Update 4. It's been a few days since my last update, and I still haven't heard from Trisha. However, Jerry recently announced their breakup on social media. I didn't stumble upon this information on my own. It was my sister who informed me. She stays in touch with our extended family, and they were the ones who noticed the post, as Trisha had been tagged in it. Supposedly, the breakup was mutual, or at least that's what they're claiming. However, I find it hard to believe, especially since Trisha deactivated all her accounts within an hour of the post. There's definitely something suspicious going on, but I can't directly ask her about it. I'll have to piece it together myself. My sister has a few theories, all revolving around my argument with Trisha. She suspects that their breakup might have stemmed from a disagreement related to it. While it's a possibility, I'm not entirely convinced. I've been wrong about many things so far, so I might be mistaken about this too. I do want to know what happened between Trisha and Jerry, and I wish I could offer her comfort during this tough time. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do anything about it, so I've decided to ignore the situation for now. Update 5. Today, I finally learned the truth about Trisha and Jerry's breakup, and it's not good news. Thankfully, it had nothing to do with me, contrary to what my sister believed. I'm relieved not to be involved in this mess. Trisha actually explained the situation to me a couple of days ago. Despite this revelation, we're still not on good terms, and I'm uncertain about where we stand. I'll refrain from discussing it further for the time being. On a side note, I previously mentioned that Trisha and Jerry had only known each other for a year. They met through friends, but Jerry was already involved with someone else at the time. When Jerry first met Trisha, he was already in a relationship, but they broke up shortly afterward. Trisha and Jerry then started dating about a month after Jerry ended things with his ex. However, a couple of months into their relationship, Trisha discovered that Jerry had been seeing both her and his ex simultaneously. Despite their argument, Trisha chose to stay with him, on the condition that he cut off all contact with his ex. In an attempt to prove his commitment, Jerry proposed to Trisha, and she, eager to move on and marry him, accepted. Recently, Trisha learned that Jerry had been using a secret phone to communicate with his ex behind her back. This discovery led Trisha to end their relationship just a few days ago. However, Jerry begged her not to expose his infidelity publicly, fearing repercussions from his family. Reluctantly, Trisha agreed not to disclose the real reason for their breakup, and they released a statement announcing their mutual decision to part ways. Trisha confided in me that she had sensed something was amiss for a while, which explained her heightened anxiety since their engagement. She expressed regret for the hurtful things she said to me when I couldn't afford to finance her wedding, attributing it to stress and frustration. In her apology, she assured me that she genuinely regretted her words and hoped for reconciliation in the future. While I appreciate her apology, I'm still unsure how to respond. I can't help but feel a deep sense of regret both for Trisha and for myself. She's always been the most important person in my life, and I can't shake the feeling that I've let her down terribly. I know I need to reach out to her, but I'm still figuring out what to say. I want her to understand that no matter what, I'll always be there for her. Update 6. It's been a while since I've been on Reddit, but I have some wonderful news to share. Trisha and I have reconciled and things are looking up. She apologized to me for everything and I forgave her considering how miserable she already was. Trisha admitted that her behavior had been influenced by the situation with Jerry, but she also acknowledged her own past actions and how I had contributed to them by not being stricter with her. We're committed to working on our relationship because we both know how important it is to support each other, especially during tough times. Regarding Jerry, I encouraged Trisha to share the truth about what happened. He had broken his promise to her, so she had no obligation to protect him. Trisha did post the truth, leading to a heated online confrontation between them. However, it only served to reveal Jerry's true character, with most people siding with Trisha. She's grateful that I pushed her to speak up, and I'm glad she did. We're now focused on rebuilding our relationship. It's still early days, and we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're committed to nurturing a healthy father-daughter bond. Trisha is also seeking therapy to work on herself, and we both recognize the importance of this journey. The future may be uncertain, but we're determined to do our best to navigate it together.